Welcome to Creepy and Geeky. I'm your host, Robert, and on today's episode, Cat Voleur is back already. And we're still talking about New Year, New You stuff with the latest Hellraiser movie that came out in 2022. Cat Voleur is a horror author with such books as Revenge Arc, My Apologies to Tanya Grace, and her upcoming nonfiction debut, Queer Tastes. She is also the co host of the Nick F. and Woo Cagecast, Willem Dafoe. Welcome back to the show, Cat.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, of course. You're bailing me out again, as usual. That's the only reason why you're making back-to-back episodes on top of having been like one of the later episodes of the last stuff I was doing at the end of uh December, or beginning of December. So you've been on a lot recently,
Yeah, I'm just crashing all the time.
right?
It's it's so funny because usually I see you put out calls, and if I've just been on an episode, I usually don't answer them because it's like someone will want that spot, and I was just on. But I was like, it was so funny because my reading group had just finished rereading Hellbound Heart. And
Mm.
I was like, yeah, I saw the call and I'm like sitting around in my Hellraiser pants next to my lament configuration. And I was like, oh, I wonder if I know any queer people I could tag in this. And then it was like, oh, me, probably, right? Like
Yeah,
I should go
no, and
talk about this.
specifically, I did want to have somebody queer on the show for this topic because this version of Hellraiser is extremely queer coded. Even
Yes.
from my own straight white male centric viewing, I could tell that, and so
Yeah.
it's definitely I wanted to have somebody on that was of that because I'm not. I could
Mhm.
have brought on my daughter, but she hasn't seen the movie yet and didn't have time to. She just started school and everything. So it just was like definitely important to me to get somebody on because I didn't want to, of course, as usual, the main focus on my show is always to have guests on who aren't, generally speaking. I have had other white, straight white men on the show, but I try to generally um break that up as often as possible because, I'm already that, and there's already a ton of podcasts like that, and I want mine to be, a little bit different.
Sure.
So definitely I want to get that perspective that I just don't have. And unfortunately, the guest I did have lined up for it, ended up having to back out, and now we're recording the night before this drops. So it's literally going to be record and then upload it to everything so that it drops the day before or the day of. So which is great. So appreciate you bailing me out again.
That makes me feel
So
very at home because we always record Nick F. and Woo like a few hours before it goes up.
oh, I am terrible. This is something I would like to do is actually get ahead. And
Yeah.
I was at one point, I was like very ahead, and I actually had like tons of episodes like recorded. I didn't upload them. I would upload them usually the night before, but I would love to get things recorded and edited and uploaded ahead of time so that um it's all sitting there ready to go. Um
Yeah.
and it would be so nice. I'd feel a lot more professional.
That's the dream.
So, right? But, meanwhile, I'm just doing this in my house and, having no professional sense at all, which is fine. Those people who listen to me already know what I'm about and appreciate it. I hope. They're still listening, some of them anyway. Um, so, but all right. But that being said, again, appreciate you coming on. I did again. I tried to put it out there again, but and I thought I had somebody, but they ended up not responding back in time. So
Yeah.
it's all good. Um, I'll definitely, whoever's responded, I'd love to have other people on the show. Um, I love having. I was having, you and several other people have been kind of rotating regular guests, but I would like to get more new guests as well. So that way I
Yeah.
can expand out and, have more of a selection in case of things going awry. So, but But yeah, so let's go ahead and talk about Hellraiser 2022.
Yeah.
If anybody's listened to the previous episode that I did on the first two Hellraiser movies, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I did that with Cat Hughes. Um, I talked about how um, those two movies, while I can appreciate how good they just never grabbed me. They're good movies, but I just didn't get the fascination that everybody else has with them. Um, and whereas with this one, and I talked about this one on an episode of Voices from the Mausoleum on Angel's YouTube channel. We talked about this like not too long after it came out. Um, I actually really enjoyed this one. And it felt more like what I was expecting out of Hellraiser to begin with. So for me, this one really hit the buttons and I felt like I understood things more. And I get that there are people I've seen the reviews on like Letterboxd and stuff like that where people who didn't like it were like, it's too exposition heavy. It tells you too much. Like, I don't need to know every little thing. And I'm like, yeah, but I did. So, like, and I don't always need that with other movies and stuff like that. But it was just like this universe, I kind of needed it explained to me, like what the different configurations were, um, what the hell priest was, and everything. So I needed all of that. And I think this movie does a fairly decent job at explaining it. And I don't think it over explains it either. I think it does a good job at explaining it while also telling an interesting story on top of that. But that said, what are your thoughts on it?
So usually, and you know this, sometimes even when I don't have like really strong opinions one way or the other on a movie,
Right.
I come on and I get heated. Hellraiser 2022 is really interesting for me, I think, because it does some things really well,
Hmm.
and some things I think pretty poorly. And it's it's interesting because it puts me somewhere in the middle of this, but I do feel like I have some strong takes for it. I also have a lot of strong takes, not only as a fan of the original, the '87 Hellraiser, but this is. Which we were just talking about in book club. This is like one of my top five favorite books of all time
Mm.
that this was based off of. I'm a huge Clive Barker fan. I consider him like one of my strongest and most recurring influences in my career.
Okay.
And it was really interesting, I think, to see kind of because while this is more of an adaptation of the movie and the movie's mythos, there is some very strong influence from the book, and I think it's interesting to see how
Yeah.
this approached those elements of the book differently than the original movie had. Um, the movie I think takes a much the '87 film takes a much stronger plot influence in terms of the human characters,
Right.
whereas this one I think is because something that I personally loved about the book, one of the reasons why it is one of my favorites is because it is so poetic and there is sort of a straightforwardness in its themes that doesn't feel like you're being hit over the head with them because it's put in such lyrical prose. I think a lot
Mm.
of that was lost in translation in the '87 film because I will say I was already a fan of the movie. I watched the movie as a kid because I was always watching slasher films as a kid. Um, and then as an adult, I read the novella for the first time, and I was shocked because it's like, is that what this movie was about? I don't remember any of this. And like plot for plot point, it is like very, very similar, but a lot of the nuance I think got kind of lost in the film. And that was not a problem that I had with the 2022 one. I had some other problems with the 2022 one, but I do think it's interesting um how it can be so strong in some elements and very weak, I think, in some other elements. I also not to I'm not a screenwriter, but can I offer a bit of screenwriting advice regardless? Um, to anyone wanting to get into the movie or uh, writing industry.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this is just because I'm not a screenwriter, but I do work in adaptation. I've recently joined the International Association of Media Tie-in Writers and have gotten some very formal briefings on IP law. And just like, and this is, I don't want to presume to give advice to David Bruckner specifically, but when you are adapting work, and this isn't universal. There are exceptions. I think it would be different with like straight sequels to an IP, and like very well respected entire franchises. But generally speaking, as you adapt someone's work, if the most interesting part of your screenplay or your manuscript or whatever is not canon to that uh mythos, I would suggest making it its own thing. I think a big part of what Hellraiser 2022 suffers from is that the most interesting ideas came out of David Bruckner's head. Um, and it's frustrating to see because it's like now I know as an IP law person that he no longer owns the right to that, but also I think this is kind of a movie that does suffer from being part of someone else's universe in a way.
Hmm.
Um, and it's tricky, right? Like because I
Right.
think Hellraiser 2020, I think it's one of the better like remakes, reimaginings that we've seen. It's like in my top 10, maybe my top 5 ever. I
Hmm.
think they did a pretty good job, especially compared to some of the other things. But with
Right.
that, there is kind of a danger, right? Because it's like you're either going to alienate fans or you're going to create something that isn't really self-sustaining. Um, I also I don't agree with the idea that this movie is too exposition heavy per se, but
Right.
I do feel like it's paced very poorly, and I think one of the reasons is because like you're doing this new reimagining of a classic, and it's not in the canon of the film timeline. It's not reliant on that. So you have like you've got to make like these big sweeping decisions for how you want to approach that. And this feels like it could have been 6 or 7 incredible sequels, which Hellraiser as a franchise, I don't want to say it never got, but sorely lacking in strong sequels as a
Yeah.
franchise. And this just kind of like rapid fire one concept after the other with a lot of David Bruckner's own vision, which just it's frustrating because I don't dislike any of the ideas, and I think they all on their own could have fit really well into the mythology better than arguably anything that we've seen in any of the sequels. But it was a lot for a single movie. Like it makes it feel more bogged down. I think it took attention away from some of the core themes that were hit a lot stronger in the original Hellraiser.
Hmm. All right. I mean, I can understand that. Yeah, I get what you're saying. I don't disagree. I think that there are some pacing issues for sure. It's very, very slow in a couple of spots, when
Yeah.
it doesn't need to be, and it could have bumped those up or either sped them up or taken them out. And
It
um, yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I think but I don't think they needed to be and it's weird to be like this was slow and I wish it had been expanded upon. But simultaneously, I think it was slow and I wish it had been like if it had been 3 separate if this had been Bruckner's Hellraiser trilogy, right? If we'd gone full
Right.
David Gordon Green, I think it would have been really interesting to have like the different sets of these characters and the different iterations of what's going on with the box. I think that could have been really cool, but
Yeah.
it feels slow as is. And also there are a lot of characters in this. Um it loses some of that tight focus that we've seen in other Hellraiser films. Sometimes and I hate to give credit to some of the worst Hellraiser films, but sometimes we have just like one or two people in the cast that are
Right.
experiencing Cenobites, and it's while I don't like those films, I do think that was a very strong concept choice for the themes
Yeah.
of Hellraiser.
Well, and I think that's ultimately like kind of where it comes down because I know the Hellraiser franchise has become a slasher franchise, but I've
Mhm.
never understood that because the very concept of it doesn't seem like it lends itself to slashers in that way. And so it's more of a metaphysical, um, psychosexual, um, you know, type of thing that I think lends itself to being more tight and more character focused on, like you said, more on one or two people that are involved with this, instead of just going for how many people can we kill.
Yes.
And I do think that this movie does kind of suffer from that, but also at the same time for what he's going for. Like you said, I think maybe if he did expand it out to um two or three movies, then he we could have gotten something where, the first couple of people get dealt with in the first couple of configurations, and then goes through this whole thing. I think that ultimately he probably was told you only get one movie, and you got to
Yeah.
do whatever you're going to do, and so I think he threw it all in there, and I think
I
it ultimately works,
I
but I
think it
agree that it probably would have benefited from some space and but also from some tightening it because it's like a 2 hour long movie. If you would tighten that up to like an hour and a half and focus just on a couple of characters and had one central character, the character played by Odessa Azion, then and she's the protagonist through all three, that could have been really good. Um, but yeah, I could see what you're saying with that. But I
see,
still
I
think
don't even
even
know.
being one movie, I think that it still mostly works.
I it
So
it mostly works. It's
yeah.
functional as a film and it has so many interesting ideas. But I do think that is kind of a problem with the industry overall, is that
Hmm.
there's not a space in horror where people are allowed to tell linear stories. Like each one is the like built on the success of one thing. I would argue, and I don't know if this is true. This is like crazy what if playing going on here, but I think that we could have gotten more Hellraiser movies out of this concept, out of this like iteration of Hellraiser, if we had had one really strong, tightly focused
Right.
remake, as it were, that had kind of pared down some of the ideas from this. Honestly, I also don't know how I feel about Riley as a protagonist for Hellraiser specifically. It's interesting because I don't necessarily have a problem with Kirsty, who also came in as like the non-freak cleaning up a bunch of freak messes, but uh,
Right.
but I do think that like just because we're playing with so much extra lore and so many like further concepts and a much larger cast than we're used to seeing from a Hellraiser movie, I feel like having a person who was not motivated by the things that the Cenobites are necessarily about sort of hurt I think that's a big reason why the themes of this one felt not as strong
Mm.
to me, is
Yeah.
because she's not really, she feels very far removed from
Well, she's
anything
pulled
that could be a
into it
core
as an
Hellraiser theme.
yeah, she's pulled into it and has no desire to mess with the box, or she's got no point in being there.
Yeah.
I think that is actually a bold idea because, you know, I'll admit I haven't seen any of the other Hellraiser movies except for the first two, but I would assume that most of the movies involved somebody playing with the box for the reasons that the box would give them power or whatever, or that's what they thought, and very much in the same thinking as the guy in this. I can't remember his name now. Goran Visnek's character,
Roland.
Roland. he, if we are, if most of the people in those and you could tell me if this is true or not, but if most of those other characters, like leads in those other, or not leads, but some of the characters in these are motivated by that, then this is an interesting alternative to that.
Um,
At least for me.
no, that's not. It's so here's also a thing. Hellraiser, it as a franchise is kind of bad. Um,
Yeah,
it
because it's
should have.
usually like a different concept with Hellraiser thrown into it. Like it was a different
Yeah,
movie that they
they
just
were
put
just like
Pinhead in.
scraping up like random scripts and calling them
Yeah,
Hellraiser so they could keep rights by the end. And it shows because I
yeah.
think Hellraiser 87 and also again the original source material like plot-wise they're very similar at a plot level. It's interesting because we get to know Frank after he has already learned to regret his his situation with the lament configuration
Right.
and he's there as a presence, he's there as kind of an antagonist to this, but and he opens up, like this world of trouble. But Kirsty I feel like already was the epitome of like someone who was just dragged into the situation against her will and
Yeah,
is a normal
yeah.
person. I would have liked, just because the franchise had gone on for so long, what I really would have liked would have been a prequel where we get to learn more about Frank and his journey with the configuration and
Mm,
what's going on with him and the Cenobites. Because I feel like every movie after that, even some of the stupider ones where they're like in space or it's a video game simulation and, like we have these really dumb premises, but a lot of those still don't follow the core person who who wants to engage with the configuration. And it was kind of like I remember when I watched this for the first time being I like at the beginning I had a lot of hope that we were following that same kind of, because as a remake it's like it makes sense to have the same kind of dynamic, I
right,
think. But it was also very frustrating to me because it's like here's this chance to follow someone and we have this really interesting character I thought in Roland who could have been that person that we, because he had his own like really interesting ideas of what to do with the box and how to
right.
interact with the Cenobites, and like he has the most interesting story in this and all of it takes place off screen, which is very frustrating because he could have been our like new Frank, and we could
Right,
have started there and seen some of the interesting things. So I understand the idea because there's no way to introduce a character like that who just wants to interact with this box where it doesn't feel like we're moving backwards because we already started with a character who we know fails with the box and then we get to see
right,
sort of, the aftermath there. But it would have been, I think that would have been a more new take on this franchise in particular. And that's also for me personally where a lot of the horror comes from in this particular franchise. Like a lot of people complain that the issue with Hellraiser is that like it's not as scary because, Frank had to go seek out this box. But I think the idea of having like more than you could ever have on a mortal plane and
hmm,
being the kind of person who seeks out and engages with that, like that mindset taps into something I think very human. And I don't know if this is just like because I grew up, in the creepy pasta horror era where it's like, if you summon this ghost, you can get one wish, but otherwise you'll be doomed to hell or whatever. And maybe it just scratches that part of my brain because I was always the kind of person that was like, yeah, I'd roll those dice. Like, why not?
That's
But
interesting.
I would have loved to see that theme hit harder in the remake because that was
Right,
scarier to me than watching creepy billionaire screw up stuff with his money. Like,
right. Yeah, no, I get that. I don't have, like, I guess because I have no experience, I don't have as much experience with the franchise, and I've never been a big enough fan of it. I've never read the story that it comes from or anything like that. So I don't have a huge connection to it. And so I think that for me, just being a mostly outsider to it all, I thought it worked better for me in that way, just because, the character, Riley, was having to deal with this stuff not because she wanted to, but because she got tricked into it, and then having to deal with the consequences of that, I thought was interesting. Um, and then having to watch her figure out what the box could do, figure out what she could get out of it, and then deciding against it, and making that, like, actually being, like, understanding the right way to do this, and actually not to beat the Cenobites, but to play the game in such a way that um she doesn't herself doesn't ultimately, I guess she still loses. That's the thing, is like,
Yeah.
no matter what, she still loses in this. And so I think it's interesting because that's the whole concept to me, is that it doesn't matter what you do. As soon as you mess with that box, you're fucked. And in some way, shape, or another, and your life is going to be, you know, badly different after that point. So, um, I do think
I
it's
think
interesting too, because, like, she's an addict, this whole thing about addiction and everything that plays into this. And in the beginning, I like the aspect of it, because she's not sure what she's seeing. She doesn't know if it's the drugs or if it's something actually happening. So I like that. But then that goes away really quick. And so it's
yeah.
like, well, then why even make her
See,
an addict? Like, so it just didn't seem like a good, it
I
was like
know.
weird in that aspect of just a um what was I saying? Just in the way of um setting up her character to have the antagonism with her brother. And it was like, you could do that in a different way. You don't have to make her an addict if that's the whole reason you want that. I don't necessarily think it's a
I
bad idea, because it is good to, show, addicts have issues too, and everything else like that, and to have the character have nuance and all that. But it was just like, it's not something that continued to play throughout the whole thing. Go ahead.
I fully agree. That's another thing that kind of frustrates me a little bit about just the setup for this, because
Yeah.
it's a really interesting concept. We've seen it work really well in horror. Like, it's a very good genre for it.
Yeah,
But
Evil Dead
again,
2013.
no,
Oh,
not
shut
that
up.
one. Haunting of Hill House.
Yes,
Like,
but
let's
yes, but
definitely not.
still.
Evil Dead 2013. I'm not going to go off on my whole tangent, but it falls into the same trap that I'm actually about to complain about with Hellraiser
Okay.
22.
All
22.
right.
It's why I didn't like it in that one either. Um, because it suffers from, it's hard to tell one of those stories in a remake or a requel, because Sam Raimi and
Yeah.
the whole timeline for Evil Dead, I know, it's not a remake. It takes place in the canon, whatever.
No,
That
everybody
makes it
says it's a
worse for
remake, but
me.
it's not. Yeah.
I don't think that helps the case one way or the other. It's really hard to tell that kind of addiction, psychological horror, what is and is not real story, when you are appealing to fans who are there to see Cenobites or Deadites. Like, it's just
Yeah.
because we know, like, you're not going to pull the wool over our eyes on this one. We know what we're here to see, unless you fully commit, right? If
Yeah.
David Bruckner had come in swinging and been like, Cenobites actually aren't real, that would have been, he would have gotten a lot
Yeah.
of hate for it, but
Oh yeah.
it would have made this
That would have been a bold
addiction
fucking
choice.
choice. Yeah.
It would have been
Yeah.
real, and I'm not saying I necessarily want to see that, but don't engage in this kind of thing. Don't try to, like, especially when you have so many other ideas. Like, he very clearly wanted to expand on the Hellraiser mythology. He wanted to share his own take on it. And a lot of the set, like 25 minutes of the setup is about whether or not what she's seeing is real and how much we can trust her as a narrator. And it's like that
Right.
time could have been spent working on this, like, grand sweeping mythology that you want to introduce into
Yeah.
this franchise.
I think that's
Like,
something that I think with me being not a big fan of the franchise as a whole. I would have liked even what we got out of this movie, in terms of what the Cenobites are and what they're after and all that. We got quite a bit, in my opinion. I felt like I understood it a lot more. But I would have liked, and maybe this is in other movies, they expand it and everything like that. But I would have liked to get more, and maybe there's people who don't like this, and that's why they don't want to do it. They're wanting to leave the mystery of it. But I kind of want to know more about who they are, like what they are, what they're about, all of that,
Mhm.
like the big mythology stuff. I feel like I got enough to understand it. I would like more. I would be interested in a another movie that continues on from this, if they were ever to make one. But I don't think they're going to. They'll probably make another remake. Um,
Probably.
but but I would have liked to have seen something like that that delved more into that. Just from my perspective, I would have thought that would have been more interesting because I think that's what, because in we get a little bit of that in the second one, if I'm recalling correctly. Um, but I don't remember. It's been so long since I've seen it. But I think they've gone into that. You can tell me yes or no, but I think they've gone into their whole world a lot more, in other installments.
So yeah, kind of it, but because there was no like consistency with the rights
Right.
holding, there's a
Yeah.
lot of clashing information like as the series devolves, which is actually the Scarlet Gospel is a book that was written by Clive Barker. It's a sequel to Hellbound Heart, and it's kind of in conversation with what the movies ended up being, which I think is
Okay.
really interesting. That might have been the direction I would have wanted to see sequels to this particular Hellraiser go, where it's just
Right.
like, oh, the original wasn't enough for you. Like, let's let's get into it, you know? Like
Yeah.
it's kind of a it's very different than his other work, I think, because it is a little bit aggressive. And you can tell that he's a little bit irate with some of the
Yeah.
fans. And it's which makes it a different reading experience, but I think it would have been a really interesting way to kind of like step up the mythology of what's going on with the Cenobites. The implication that I get from the 2022 Hellraiser, which I do treat as its own mythology,
Right.
uh, because it does function differently, like from the outset. And one
Yeah. Yeah.
thing that I took away from this is just that, like, Cenobites seem to be people who have chosen the Leviathan configuration.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't know how I feel about I don't dislike it in premise, but it felt very tacked on to the end of an already very full plot here.
Yeah, because that's what we get. That's what it seems like is because Leviathan is power, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I feel like that's kind of what happened, but like yeah, everybody because that's what we get with Roland at the end is he had chosen the sensation one before,
Yeah.
and he got a chance to redo it and asks for power. Um and they give it to him. Um and then he becomes the Cenobite at the end. Spoilers, everybody. But but I did like that. I thought that was an interesting idea about
It,
how that potentially, and we all assume that's how they were made, especially based on what little I know of the original movies too. Is that's how Pinhead was made too. Pinhead was a former human that was made into this Cenobite. Like Cenobites
yeah.
were formerly human, and they just advanced to a different plane. So, um, yeah, I like that idea. That was one of the
But
ideas I really liked. So,
it's it's also it's an idea that I really liked about this movie. It is, however, a big reason why I almost feel like this should have not been a remake. Not even that it goes against the original canon, but just there's the opportunity, like the box, the configurations, I thought
Hmm.
I'll just say this outright. The configurations are probably my favorite part of this movie.
Oh
I
yeah.
thought it was really interesting. It's not canon to the Hellraiser universe in any kind of capacity, and the idea of treating um the puzzle box, I don't think they ever call it Lashmarkin's box in this, but
Mm-mm, no.
I do kind of like that they took a step back from the movie's imagining of the lament configuration to make it like its own thing with multiple configurations, which
Yeah.
I really liked. I liked that they had a mythology for what the different ones offered and how they worked and stuff. And it's like I'm almost more interested in the box than I am in the people at this point, which is kind of a screenwriting issue, but it's also like I think having this be like a very demented sort of mystical puzzle box, I it's obviously very Hellraiser coded, but the mythology was different enough that I really think that they could have gotten away with it. And I also think that using the Leviathan to have this sort of transformation could have been like I think that's the real horror of like Frank's story had it been seen to its full conclusion, had we followed Frank. It's another
Right.
reason why I get kind of frustrated that we have an entirely different framing to Hellraiser 2022, because this was a great opportunity to be like, here's what it really means to ascend, in this context
Right.
and in this world. And I think there's just so much fascinating potential there. I felt like it was really tacked on at the end, and I also feel they mentioned so many times, and 87 Hellraiser is guilty of this also, where they're like, "Ooh, it's pain or pleasure depending on who you are, where you can be angels or demons or whatever," and they play around with that concept in a really fascinating way. They like kind of dance around it in 2022, where he's describing them as angels and we see other people describe them as demons, and they're both very assured in these opinions and through the notes, and it's um like they do a really interesting setup there. But at the end, even though they said like they have more pins in them or than like a human could withstand or whatever, whenever we see that transformation into Cenobite, like it's very quick,
Hmm.
where I think the appeal for someone seeking sensation, and I think the fear of someone not seeking sensation would be the slow transformation into a Cenobite. So to see it just kind of like hand waved in yes, he chose Leviathan, and they like pan in and they pan out, and then he's like a Cenobite. I think that was very not satisfying for me.
That's funny. I do want to say, like, getting into the Cenobites itself, I really enjoyed these designs um, of
Oh,
their whole
yes.
look. Like, that's one of the things that I think they really did a very good job on, of basically showing that they are basically wearing their skin. They're just massively modified. It goes into a lot of um just the whole like body modification kind of subculture, which I thought was interesting.
I'm
Um
always saying we should have more body modification in horror movies.
it
Like,
just it's horrifying. It made
yeah.
so much sense for these creatures to be like this rather than being in the the bondage fetish gear that they've been in since the first movie.
And
Um
again, the costume design in this I think is really ingenious. I like that it ties it like the metal ties in really well with the way that the box looked and operated.
mhm,
The skin design was really clever. It once more though does kind of hammer in that point because the body modification community is like a different subculture than
right.
gay than the traditional gay bar community. It feels like a different aesthetic to me. It feels
Right.
like a different community that they are
Well,
kind
but I
of
think
drawing inspiration from and trying to cater to, and it as a remake that is kind of frustrating, even though as a viewer I was very impressed.
Well, because I
outside
don't
of the
think they were
Hellraiser sphere.
necessarily going for either appealing to the modification group or to the queer community in either one of those senses. I didn't feel like that. Maybe it's because I'm not queer and I don't know.
I was gonna say they
Um,
absolutely were catering to the queer scene, to the
but I
80s
think
queer scene.
but there is some of the Venn diagram of people who are queer who also like body modification as well. I again, I'm not fully versed on that, but I know there are people who are queer who do like body modification.
I'm
So
like in the middle of that Venn diagram, but it was still
that's what
it
I'm
was a
saying.
little bit frustrating
Yeah.
still. And not even
Sure.
frustrating in the way of like I think it was bad, but frustrating in the way of this would have been a very clever way to pay homage to Clive Barker in an original piece if it
Well,
had been spread out.
I think this is a very interesting thing is because Clive Barker was a producer on this one. He
Yes.
did work with David Bruckner on making this movie. So he was
Yeah.
definitely a sounding board for David Bruckner in making this movie. I think in a way that obviously none of the other people probably after three did. And they
Yeah.
completely, the producers completely cut um Barker out after a certain point and wanted nothing to do with him because they were like, well, we're just gonna take these stupid ass scripts we have and just put Pinhead into them anyway, so it doesn't matter. Um, this is just all about making money for us. But um, so I feel like at least in that way, because Barker was more involved, um, that it lends a lot of credibility. And I think that it's probably one of those instances where, Bruckner said, hey, I've got these ideas, and he ran them by Barker, and Barker was like, sure, those work. So it wasn't necessarily and maybe had notes, but for the
Yeah.
most part was just like, do your thing. This is very good. I like what you're going for. And I don't know. I haven't read anything up. I should. But on what Barker had to say after that, yeah, it says in the IMDb notes, Clive Barker's first direct involvement in a Hellraiser film since Bloodline.
Yeah.
Um, and he was shut out of the series from Inferno on. So, um, but yeah, so I mean, I think that part of it was cool. I think going back to the design of the Cenobites, I really liked that all of them had pins
Yeah.
in them as well. That was like a neat unifying thing besides their um flayed skin designs. Um I like that they were all very non-binary. Um
I
like for the
it was
most
one
part, like some
thing,
were obviously more female than others.
sure.
But even the male ones seemed to be very like not fully male. There was none that were like
Yeah.
grotesquely male. Like, although in the earlier movies, you could tell which ones were mostly male. Like most of the ones
Yeah.
were male, and there were only a couple of female ones. These seemed very non-binary and more feminine, which I thought was a very interesting um, aspect of it.
That was one thing leading up to this movie, um, that I was very excited about.
Yeah,
There was a lot of buzz about Jamie Clayton stepping in as Pinhead, and I thought it's interesting because I had always like reading the book, you see these Cenobites as because they're not human, they are
yeah,
non-binary, as close as we could like tell. And I liked the idea of having more androgynous Cenobites.
yeah,
I wish that they had pushed it just a little bit further, actually, specifically with the Hell Priest's design.
mm,
Just because, and this was something I don't even think I noticed on my first two watches, but like I think maybe they had carried over the feminine look, more than I would have personally liked to see. I would have liked for Hellpriest to be the most androgynous, and then sort of varying levels of gender nonconformity on the other Cenobites. But
Right.
I will say, this design, in that regard at least, felt closer to how I had imagined Cenobites. So it
Yeah.
was interesting to see, and I think Clayton did a really great job also,
Oh,
like as a
absolutely.
my favorite performance in the movie.
What little screen time she actually has in the movie, which is
Yeah.
frustrating because it would like, and I think that's one of the things that everybody always wants more of is more of the Cenobites. Um,
Yeah.
and it's always frustrating when you get so little of them. But as much as we do get of Jamie Clayton, I think she's doing a phenomenal job in this movie, and I love that they also um modulated the voice in a way to also expand on that androgyny um
Yeah.
and that sexlessness because sure Pinhead looks more feminine but with that kind of deeper voice going on and that kind of otherworldly voice because they're enhancing it with digital effects that it just I don't know it worked in such a unique way um that it was definitely a good step in a different direction to distinguish it from Doug Bradley's performance.
Yeah, I like that this was not and you could already tell with the script that they were not trying to go in that direction.
Right.
But I like that she really made the character her own.
Absolutely.
Um,
Yeah.
because I think it would have been very easy to draw too much inspiration from Doug Bradley in this situation. The temptation would be very real, I think, because what an
Yeah.
iconic performance, you know?
Yeah. Well, and I think that's ultimately what this movie fully is. This movie is a remake. It's not even a remake. It's a reimagining of the
Yeah,
core elements. It's not a reimagining of the original story. It's like taking all the elements of what the Hellraiser universe is about and modernizing it and making it more of a it's just making it different from what came before in a way that mostly works. But I think that it was the best direction to go because we'd already had so many. Even after Doug Bradley left the franchise, you had whoever became Pinhead after that basically
yeah,
aping his performance, and it's like, okay, but that's lame. Like, make something different and new and unique, and try to do something and that's what I think most of these franchises, especially the ones that are really old, it's hard to do, and that's why I think that at a certain point and this is something that I keep thinking of and keep talking about recently, is I really think they need to stop going to the well on a lot of these older franchises. Unless you
yeah,
can come up with something that's really, really interesting, stop just making it to just play out the IP.
yeah,
So, and I think that's what's been smart about with Freddy Krueger, even with Nightmare on Elm Street. After that remake failed, they were like, okay, we're done. We're not doing it anymore. We tried, it didn't work, so we'll just leave it alone. Um, and so I like that they're kind of
that
backing away from that kind of stuff. And hopefully they'll do more of that. Although I know with like Friday the 13th, they're going to go do a TV series, which I think is interesting. I'm gonna watch it. I'm gonna go in with an open mind. But but like a lot of these, it's just like, okay, come on. Go ahead. What were we gonna say?
Oh, no, just I didn't even think about it in this context, but A Nightmare on Elm Street is another one of those. Like they didn't necessarily play with the psychological component as much, but they did try to
Mm,
do that fake out where they're like, is Freddy guilty? Is he not? Was he innocent
yeah.
when we burned him? And it's like, we have all seen Nightmare on Elm Street movies.
Right.
We know where this is going. Like,
Yeah.
there's a time and a place to tell that story, but it is not in the remake of Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's what's interesting too, is because going like just following this thread right now, is that with Nightmare on Elm Street, we've had a couple of movies, and you and I just talked about this recently with I think it was you and I. We just talked about this with Black Phone 2.
Yeah.
That Black Phone 2 is taking some of those concepts and doing that. And so did Mr. Crockett, the Hulu movie.
Yeah.
That takes some of those concepts and remixes them just a little bit in a different way that's at least somewhat fresh and new without having to go back to the Freddy well. Because I
And
think you have to leave it with Robert England doing Freddy and then just be done. Be
yeah.
okay with the that franchise being done. Um, and I think because he put his stamp on it in such a unique way that it's going to be almost impossible for anybody to follow that. Go ahead, what are you
Here's
gonna say?
something that I would like to bring back, just like on and I think this would be really good for Nightmare on Elm Street specifically because they already kind of had a run with this, but I think it'd be really interesting also for things like Hellraiser, where it's got newer installations that were well received but not
Hmm.
financially successful enough to make more movies. Um, I would love to bring back print spin-offs of these things. One of my all-time favorite publishing imprints was Black Flame, and they were really popular in like the early 2000s to 2010s for essentially doing Nightmare on Elm Street fan fiction. And it's like I would love that to go because you hear Robert England when you read the name Freddy, and that
Yeah.
made it very successful. And it's like I would love to see that kind of energy return where we still have these franchises and these areas to play, but we don't need like a full movie production necessarily every time.
Yeah. Yeah. Add a like
And
continuing it into print or comic books also print, but books or comics or
yeah,
something like that is always a good way to go for that kind of stuff. I mean, Star Wars literally created a whole fucking thing, a whole secondary
yeah.
universe version of their stories
And I
in that way.
honestly like some of the Star Wars book canon more than I like the Star Wars
No,
film
yeah.
canon. And it's interesting to see how they diverged, you know? I
Yeah.
think that would be a really interesting way to kind of continue some of these because I feel bad because we have like reboots that are getting their own sequels and prequels and continued, and Hellraiser I think is one of the better ones, and it's never going to get that same kind of attention. I feel like this movie is going to get kind of
Right.
lost because it tried to do too much too soon, which for as frustrating as it can be to watch that, I would rather have that than them try nothing new, you know?
Yeah. I think ultimately I think with this movie specifically, I think that it did for me, it was interesting enough. And I think that's the weird double-edged sword with stuff like this is that where for me as a person who wasn't a big fan of any of the other parts of the series, that watching this movie kind of brought me in a little bit. And whereas I know that there are other fans who hated this one, who thought it was terrible.
Yeah.
And so you're always going to have that no matter what you do with a remake. It's the same thing even with like, my own favorite franchise, the Evil Dead series. When the remake came out, the 2013 movie, um, when that came out, there are people who hate that movie still.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, that's crazy. Like it's good. It fits in, whatever. And then even with the Evil Dead Rise, even more people are just like, this series has gone to hell. It's just like, and personally, I don't agree, but it's I that's always what happens when you try to continue this stuff is you're gonna have people, but they're part of what they're doing with these kind of movies is bringing in the new fans. They're not going to play fully to the old fans. And that's, I
Right.
think, as an old fan, you have to understand that. Is that they're not just going to give you the greatest hits. They're going to push things forward. They're going to remix it. They're going to change things up in such a way because they want new fans. Because
Yeah.
the old fans, you're getting older. You're not going to be around all the time. So they need the new fans to kind of help continue this. And so like it's again, it's a mixed bag, double-edged sword type of
Yeah.
thing for me because as much as I like it when it's done well, um like I said before, like I don't think they need to go to the well all the time with some of these franchises. That being said, they can continue making Evil Dead movies as long as they're good. So, in which there's a new one coming out this year. I'm
I'm
excited.
really excited for that one.
Yeah, it looks. I mean, I don't. We know nothing about it, but I'm just like, I don't care. It's a new Evil Dead movie. We have, as an Evil Dead fan, I'm living it up now. So it's really cool. But
We also, and I talked about this when I came on for the substance when we were talking about Black Phone
hmm
2, but 'cause it's just such a pet peeve of mine, and I'm glad that we have Hellraiser 2022 because overall I
yeah,
do like it. I think it did a lot of really interesting things. It plays with some of my favorite like underutilized tropes also that I don't get to
mm,
see very often. And there's a lot that I'm glad that we have this one for. But rather than remaking the same things over and over and over again, if you have to go to the well of inspiration for films, I promise filmmakers, Clive Barker wrote other things. They are good. We could have them. They did Hulu also. I don't remember if it was like right before or right after
the Books of
Hellraiser,
Blood.
but
Yeah,
they did Books of Blood, which was an anthology series, and it's like don't do the I swear, don't do Books of Blood. Pick like five stories from the Books of Blood and just like let directors take on this material like as written
yeah.
from the book. I'm begging you. And actually, like I think one of my favorite, not one of my favorite, my second favorite Clive Barker movie of all time is Midnight Meat Train, which came
Mm,
from Books of Blood. Like writers do other things, you know?
yeah.
It's like it's so frustrating. I wish they had done it with Joe Hill. I wish Clive Barker, like I wish his producer credit had been on one of those batshit crazy stories. He's got one where people like where giants made out of normal human people like melded together fight one
Wow.
another, and it's like do that. I'm begging you guys. Like he has so many good books, and like there was right around the time that this came out also we were seeing the rise of more like YA horror stuff.
hmm
Abarat would be a great adaptation. Why HBO hasn't picked up Imagica is beyond me. Like there are
Mm,
options. And as
yeah.
much as I loved Hellraiser 2022, I there's just so much material that they could have done, and I would always rather see that, I think, than a remake, even if it ended up not being as good. Like I'd love to see them take some new swings. And while I'm making requests, I would also really, really love for someone to do a story about like a I would love to see a story about a lunatic dude who just starts capturing violent creatures from another realm that is not a remake of another property. Like that's the moneymaker right there. And it's always like a Hellraiser remake or a 13 Ghosts remake or like
Oh,
some
which they're
other,
doing a 13 Ghosts TV series.
which I
I just
don't
heard that today
want.
or yesterday.
It's frustrating because I do want it. Like I the ghost backstories were the best part of 13
Oh
Ghosts, but
yeah.
also like give me that mystical puzzle box house, please. That's a
Yeah.
that's what I'm really begging for, and it doesn't have to be tied in to an existing IP. Somebody could just write that and they could have all of my money.
Yeah, that's a yeah.
The
I
house
do
was so
think
cool in this.
the
Like the
house was
set
very cool,
design
yeah.
was stunning.
Yeah, the house was very cool. The ghosts' backstories were awesome. So hopefully they'll lean into that aspect rather than the people. Because, like, who
I hope
cares?
so.
Like,
Those people sucked.
yeah. Yeah, because if you're gonna make a 13 Ghosts TV series, then each episode's gotta be about each one of the fucking ghosts. And like and tell the backstory and like just really get deep into like their past and like have like and really get into like historical set pieces. That would be
Yeah,
fun.
that would be
Like you're
really
gonna have to
cool
pour some money into it,
because
but that would be really cool.
I that's my fear is that it's going to be too expensive to do it that way, but I
Yeah.
remember I had the DVD of 13 Ghosts,
Mm,
and the like one of the bonus features was you could watch like a little 2 minute like illustrated short
of
about
each
each of the
one. Yeah.
ghosts, and it's like that always I for a long time I thought 13 Ghosts was like one of the coolest movies ever, and it took an embarrassingly long time for me to figure out that I didn't actually like the movie nearly as much as I liked the bonus features on the disc,
Yeah. And the
because like
concepts, yeah.
that was so cool.
The movie itself is definitely trash, and
It's not so good.
it borders on that trash level of it's almost there.
Yeah, it
If it tipped
yeah.
over just that little bit, suddenly this became an episode about 13 ghosts.
I
Um,
well, they're doing the same things here though, like I because we
yes.
care more about the like we care more about the Cenobite backstory, I think, than we care about some of the characters, and the set
Well,
piece is really cool, but we
yeah.
don't spend enough time in the house, and there are a
Yeah.
lot of parallels, and
Oh, absolutely.
I wish this had been I I wish this had been a movie about Roland
Yeah.
making the Cenobite trap house. And then if it got picked up, we could have had a 6 year time skip. We could have introduced some good guys at that
Yeah.
point in the franchise. And it's not like even Roland's part in this movie, he has a good guy who's kind of trying to come to terms with her involvement in his schemes. And it's like
Hmm.
I thought was more interesting than Riley also. I would have loved her story in this grand mix of
Mm.
things.
Yeah.
Because man, I felt bad for her. And she it goes through all of this stuff to kind of seal this box away, and then someone brings it right to her, you know? And it's like
Yeah. Yeah.
that was scarier also to me, I think, than the main uh premise going on in this. But it's frustrating because I would have loved to see more done on a slower timeline for
Yeah.
the Hellraiser 2022 canon.
Yeah. I mean, I get that. I think that, if we're talking about what we would have liked to have seen, I think
Yeah.
that ultimately, I think I agree with you in that, like, more Cenobite stuff, more of a focus on a character who was really like exploring the box and what it could do for them and the consequences of that. Um,
Oh,
and like I just think that like you could have delved more into, I don't know, the like, because there's always been this layer of sexuality to Hellraiser that I just don't think they've, like, other than in the first movie, that
yeah.
they really delved into. And now with, modern sensibilities, I think you could have leaned more heavily into that,
Yeah.
and gotten kinkier with it.
I
And
absolutely think so.
I think that's something that's definitely missing from this version of it as well, is that there was just this, it still
And
felt sanitized in a
you
way that it just didn't feel like you wanted this kind of like kinky, kind of gross, like, at least
yeah.
for me, you wanted this aspect of it that just wasn't in it. And that I think was, as much as I still enjoy the movie, I do think that that layer is missing to it, that I think is something that I would like to see them do maybe in a future version of this.
You were talking also about how this was like a little bit more of a modernized take on Hellraiser. I
Hmm.
think one of the what I would have liked to seen from if either this were like a direct continuation from the 87 one, or if it had still been a reimagining just set in modern day, one of the ways that I would have liked to see those themes hit harder is I think there would have been and this actually is a concept that they talk about a little bit more in some of the really terrible sequels.
Hmm.
Um, but I'm always saying, like take good ideas that were executed
Yeah.
poorly and bring them back. And in modernizing, I think the concept behind like freedom of sexuality and expression and you know, living in these sort of kink communities, those are all more widely accepted like
Yeah.
in the 2020s than they were in 87. And it's like I think it would have been really interesting to see sort of the cultural change around the idea of what it means to seek out this kind of pleasure. And like I feel like it could have been really interesting in that in the idea that like he might have had more support from peers. He wouldn't have been like some weird outlier to
Right.
begin with. But then like that social pressure could also have impacted his lack of enjoyment in the experience in kind of an interesting way. Like
Mm.
those are some of the mental dynamics that I would have liked to see go
Yeah.
into a modernization of this.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I agree. I think that, what we got was decent.
Yeah,
But the aspects that I feel were missing, I would, if it's done well, I would like to see that kind of stuff happen in potentially a future installment. Um, and fingers crossed
and
we get something that, works in those, realms. But who knows? I mean, I think that's just the problem, is that there's so many people with so many different ideas. Like Hellraiser, I think, as a, because I know there's comic books. It's been
yeah,
expanded upon in comic books, more so than in anything Clive Barker's done. They've gone into the world. And in fact, the main character in this, Riley McKendry, is actually partially named, or the McKendry name is named after Rebecca McKendry, who's written some Hellraiser stories and is a big, huge fan of Hellraiser herself. And so I thought that was a nice little nod to her. Um, and um, so I know they've done stuff in these comics. I haven't read any of the comic books, because again, I haven't ever been interested in the story enough to go search it out. But again, those are just like the things that I've always perceived Hellraiser to be, and it
yeah,
always felt like that's what it should be closer to being, but has never, at least as far as I know, especially in the movies, it's never been that way. So, um, but again, yeah, I think that would be interesting for me if they would dive into more of that kind of aspect of it,
yeah.
than they have. So,
And I think that would be more I think that would be more true to Clive Barker's vision and what he put
yeah.
forth in the original novella. I cannot express just like how even though plot for plot point they are almost the same, the like themes and the atmosphere of reading the book to watching the original movie are so different because you have this like very poetic, almost erotic sort of narrative going on in the
Right.
book. And then when you just see those things happening, it's perceived a lot more as like an, oh God, what's wrong with that dude? As opposed to
Yeah.
like the relationship that Frank really had that was
Well,
drawing him to the box in the first place.
and I think that's what's interesting about the movie too, the original movie, is that there's this aspect of the whole, um he's seeking like pleasure and stuff, and you have this BDSM quality to the original movie, but it feels like it's like the movie itself feels like, rather than being a, um like, kind of like, I don't know, like a celebration of it in a way, not a celebration, but accepting of it, that
Yeah.
it actually like makes it dirty, and like is just like, oh well, no, that's just negative.
Yeah.
It turns into a negative, and I was just always like, but that's not how it should be. It really should be this thing where, as you're exploring these aspects of sexuality, and everything, that this is how it, because the person who's involved in this would be seeking new pleasures, because they've experienced all the pleasures that they can get. And I
Yeah.
get that they did that with Roland, but it was more of a telling thing. Like he'd already
Right, we didn't get to
experienced all the
see
pleasure.
it.
We didn't get to see it. And so you didn't feel that aspect of it. And again, I think it's just one of those things where, and you can do it in this modern age. You can do more on that level in a movie. It's just they chose not to with this one.
Yeah.
And maybe it was mandates through Fox because this was originally a Fox movie before it got dropped on Hulu. Because Disney got or Fox got bought by Disney and stuff. So maybe that was what it was. I don't know. Who knows? The actual workings of all this. But again, I think that's for me, that would make it a more interesting movie. But
Yeah.
who knows? I mean, who knows if
Uh,
they'll do something like that in the future? Fingers crossed. So,
I do have like one more pro and one
yeah.
more con about this movie that just didn't fit in naturally in this conversation. Um, one, and this is a pet peeve, and again, I think they improved upon it actually in 2022. It's one of the aspects I feel they strongly did better, but I don't think it's done as well as I would have liked. The
Hmm.
idea of the lament configuration in the book is like this nearly unsolvable puzzle box, which I think is an important part of the like consent
Mm,
metaphor. Where it's like you have to go, so obviously other people get pulled into it because Frank escapes essentially, which
yeah.
breaks the code open. And then, like the whole order of Cenobites gets involved. But like the idea, like it, in the book, it's like such a you have to go so far out of your way and you have to commit so much to the like obtaining and the solving of this intricate puzzle box. And I think that it added something to the metaphor and the themes and Frank's character and or in this case it would have been Roland's character, I guess. And they do a better job making this look like a puzzle box that has to be solved. But in
Yeah.
the 87 Hellraiser, it was basically just a box that would open itself if you were in a room with it. And in the
Yeah.
2022 one, the solving of it, like there are pieces that move and it looks really cool, but I was very disappointed because we get all of this lore about the configuration, and I thought like, oh, it's actually going to be a real puzzle box this time, and I got so excited for it. And then basically the solution is just to stab enough people that it solves itself into the next
Yeah.
configuration,
Yeah.
which was like kind of a
Yeah.
letdown. I didn't love that
Yeah. Yeah.
because again,
Yeah.
it's important for the metaphor that like you have to seek this out and
Yes.
but also other people can just willy-nilly get kind of sucked into it and stab each other and you don't have to try and solve the puzzle, which I is disappointing for me. Um the obvious thing that I think the 2022 film did really well, and it's such a low bar to clear, but I'm glad that they cleared it. There's a gay couple in this one.
Hmm.
Like, it's
Yeah.
not implied, it's not queer coded, like they're just openly
There,
gay, and it's like
yeah.
it's so and like happy, not we don't get to see them be happy for very long, but they're in like a loving,
Right.
committed relationship at the start of this movie, and it's like that is so exceptional to see in this franchise, which was so heavily themed around the gay community and has been
Right.
going for so many years. And we're like just now finally getting like a good gay couple in it.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree. I think, yeah, that's one of the aspects of it that I thought was great, because it's like because yeah, like you said, the Hellraiser has been very um queer coded in the past without
Yeah.
being queer. So there's like this one especially seemed very open and accepting of that, and very, again, this is where those things where it's like I really wish they would have ticked over just a little bit more in those ideas. And
Yeah.
again, I really do think this is a good movie. It's just there's definitely those aspects of it that are you just want a little bit more of. And that hopefully they will, you know expand on it maybe in future installments if they ever get a chance to do it again. Who knows? But yeah, I don't know. It's definitely something that would be interesting if they could do that. What was the puzzle box. What you were saying about that. Yeah, it would have been more fun to see the person transforming at each stage rather than it just transforming itself. I agree. I
Yeah.
think that aspect of it. I
And it
think
would have
the
taken
aspect of it.
so long in this movie, but so I understand
Yeah.
practically why they didn't do it, but
Yeah, of course.
also it's important.
But that's where we go back to what you were saying in the beginning is this should have been two or three movies and each movie could have dealt with two configurations maybe,
Yeah.
and then that way we build up to these and then it wouldn't have felt like those, figuring out the puzzle box aspects would have taken so long because it just would have been part of the overall um concept of the film. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
Would have
Yeah.
been nice. And again, I do think that this movie did better than the 87 one.
Oh yeah.
Um in that regard, but I would have liked to
Yeah.
see it pushed a little bit further, especially because they added so much to the way that the box functions. Like I don't think that there's ever going to be another Hellraiser movie this much about the box. Like this was the time to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Um,
But
yeah. All right. Um, I don't think I have anything else I need to say about this.
my
Um,
final thought, and I say this all the
yeah,
time. I
go
say
ahead.
this all the time, even when I'm not talking about Hellraiser. But if you get the opportunity, like anybody listening to this, any Hellraiser fans who have not already done so, if you get the opportunity to read The Hellbound Heart, it is a like read in a day. It's super short. I don't even think it's like 50,000 words. It's a
Yeah.
short little teeny tiny 100-page book, and it is just so lyrical and poetic and there aren't going to be a ton of surprises for you if you've already seen Hellraiser, but I think it's a really good way to understand the themes a lot better than the movie gives you.
Right.
Like, highly
Yeah.
recommend.
Oh yeah. I always say that, you know, if you liked something that's based on a book, you should probably go read the book too.
Yeah.
Um, just to get that extra nuance because a movie is an adaptation. It's going to be, something that's been distilled and changed in such a way. And I will say that sometimes, don't get me wrong, sometimes I'll have read a story that the movie is based on and I don't care for the story. I
Yeah.
think the movie figured out a way to adapt it in such a way that made it better.
Mhm.
But that's rare. Because more often than not, the book or the story that these things come from, and I think that's more indicative like for a short story because a
Yeah.
short story that's expanded into a movie, the movie can add depth and nuance that maybe wasn't there in the short story. So that's usually where you can get a little bit of a you can play with things a little bit more. But if it's a book, no. Like the book is definitely going to be a better source of all of that for sure. So, and this is somebody who doesn't read as much as he used to. So, um,
And it really is,
but
it's like one of the prettiest books I've ever written, which people always kind of raise their eyebrow at me. But like, you read it and you're just like so drawn into how like beautifully everything is described.
that's cool.
So good.
All right. Well, I appreciate you coming on last minute, very last minute, to talk about this as it is. It's not only last minute, but it's very late at night.
Yeah.
Um, it's almost 2 o'clock in the morning, so this is going to be a quick turnaround into an episode. So, but yeah, um, this is great. I had a lot of fun talking about this. We explored some cool stuff, I think.
Yeah.
You know, definitely. I think if in general, if you liked Hellraiser and you didn't see this movie yet because of whatever, give it a try.
Do
I
it.
think that
Yeah.
you may not love it, but um you may like it more than you think you do. I mean, I don't know.
And I think
Depends
this is
depends on how precious you are about things. So,
it sounds like kind of a cop out thing to say, but I do genuinely believe like there are remakes out there where if you like the original, it's like this one is going to make you mad and it's not really going to offer you anything new. This one is going to give you so much to think about. I think even if you end up kind of hating it, you're still going to be like, but there were a lot of really interesting ideas, and I think it's going to kind of stick in your head.
yeah.
Um, I remembered a lot of the concepts from because I hadn't seen it. I think the last podcast I talked about this movie on, I think we covered it the same year it was out. Like, so I haven't seen it in a couple years now.
Yeah. Yeah, this
Um,
was the first time I'd seen it since it came out.
so it's like it's really, but I remembered all of those concepts more than I remembered the characters, and usually it's kind of the other way around for me. This one just had like so many interesting things to play with, and I
Mm,
definitely I would recommend it.
yeah, definitely. All right. Well, thank you again. I
Of
appreciate you
course.
coming on, and hopefully, obviously, you're welcome back anytime. But hopefully, I can have some space between you
Yeah.
and some other people for a little bit. Not that of course, not that I don't love having you on because I do. Um, but yeah. So, but don't worry, I already have guests for the next two episodes that are not cat. So,
Yeah.
but obviously, if they end up having to back out for whatever reason, cat might drop in again. So we'll see.
But in theory, you
Uh,
guys get a break from me,
yeah,
so
exactly. So,
enjoy it.
but yeah, yeah, you'll be back soon enough, I'm sure. I'll talk to you off air and get you to sign up for one of my future installments here. Um, all right. Well, why don't you let people know where they can find you, and maybe what your next book coming out is?
Yeah, you can find me on Blue Sky and Instagram at Cat Voleur. You can find all of my books on my website, catvoleur.com. I have just recently gotten in the proof for Graveyard Shark, which is my most recent novelization, and Queer Tastes, where I actually briefly mentioned Hellraiser 2022, will be coming out this Pride Month. So,
Oh, all right. Awesome. Well, definitely check out her stuff. She's got very good stuff. I like your writing. Obviously, I'm behind. I used to be up on top of it, but I'm very behind now. Um, but definitely the ones I mentioned at the top, Revenge Arc and My Apologies to Tanya Grace, are really good. So definitely go check those two out if you haven't already. Um, and I don't know if I still have a blurb in Puppet Shark, but
you do.
I did. There you go. I have a blurb in Puppet Shark if you want to go check out her novelization for that, which arguably for me is actually better than the movie. So, um,
Aw.
yeah, no, it's great. It's funny. I think that you add a lot. This is one of those times where it's like like I don't normally dig on novelizations, but um, I think yours adds like humor and depth to it that like because I actually read your book first before I saw the movie. And so when I saw the movie, I was just like, this is missing so much. So
I
but I
appreciate
mean,
it.
yeah, but definitely go check those out. They're a lot of fun. So all right, well, I will let you go and hopefully you can get some sleep now. Um and we'll talk to you soon. But until then, stay creepy. Thanks for listening. Creepy and Geeky is produced and hosted by Robert Clark. If you like what you've heard, please consider giving the show 5 stars and a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and share the podcast on social media to help spread the word. Make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app or at creepyandgeeky.com. You can follow the podcast by going to creepyandgeeky.com and clicking on any of the social links. If you'd like to follow me, you can find my links at geekthulu.com. You can support the podcast by ordering teas and more on TeePublic or by donating to the Coffee page. All of the links are in the show notes. Finally, don't forget, stay creepy.